Unlike most car manufacturers, at which maintenance schedule is based on the distance driven, Mercedes uses a different type of schedule for maintenance that is a function of a different factors such as the engine temperature, oil level, engine speed, car speed, the distance driven from the last maintenance done, and the time that has elapsed since the last maintenance. And Mercedes calls this maintenance schedule flexible service system. So let's dive right in, see how these numbers are calculated, and what Mercedes requires you to do when the one wrench or the two wrench appears on your odometer. Let's dive right in. So what Mercedes does provides every owner with this booklet right here, which is your service booklet for light trucks, or in this case, Mercedes ML W163 class cars. And as you flip through this booklet, which I definitely recommend you do, unless you don't like to, and this is why I'm making this video, the flexible service system that Mercedes describes on page 4 is divided into two types of service. There's a minor service A, and there is a major service B. Now, all things being equal, you will usually have to perform this service A or B on average, as it says here, about every 12,000 miles or so. However, if you beat on your car, this service wrench, whether it be A or B, will show up earlier on your car. Also, exceptions to the B service, if your example past 14,000 miles, Mercedes may very well give you multiple B service due back to back rather than alternating between A and B. Now, in addition to the scheduled maintenance you're required to do under A and B services, there's other additional work that you're required to do, such as brake fluid, which you are to change every 2 years, coolant, which you are to change every 3 years, interior filter or the cabin filter, which you are to replace every B service. Tire rotation, we'll dive into that, what tire pressure and rotation is, and that's largely based on a tire manufacturer. And for the tire size of this car, which is a 275 50R, no, 55R17 or 275, well, it says it right here. For 275 55R17s, there's a certain, only so many manufacturers that produce this tire. And besides the tire, spark plugs, which are due every about 100,000 miles. So let's see what this service A requires and what the service B requires. What Mercedes also recommends you do on a regular basis as you drive your car, say once a week or every time you fill up your gas tank, is to do some regular checkups. And I have made a video a while back about this, but we'll cover it again, specific for the Mercedes ML Class W163. What you should be doing every time you get gas in the car is a engine oil level check. You can either do it under the hood with the dipstick, or you could do it inside the car, which I'll show you. As we were talking about the engine oil level, you can either do it through this dipstick right here, and there's going to be a minimum and a maximum range right there. You see it? And right now we're at the top of the range. Or you could do it inside the car in such a fashion. So you go, say it's you don't want to get out of the car, it's cold out. So what you do, you turn the ignition on like so, and as soon as I'll show you, some dotted lines appear, you double click this twice, just like so, and you can see oil is pretty much 0.0, meaning no oil is necessary. The oil level is good. Shut the ignition off again. Let's see what else it tells us to check on a regular basis. The other thing you should be checking regularly on this car when you're getting gas is your coolant level. Here it is right here. When the engine is cold, it should be right at this line right here. When it's warm, it should be slightly above that. But more or less, this is what we're looking at. It then covers the brake fluid. Brake fluid is right here, and let me show you how to properly do this, so in case you can't quite see. Now, the way to properly check the brake fluid, although it may not necessarily be visible, you put a flashlight behind it like so. You see it? And it tells you where the level is, and we are right between the minimum and the maximum. Now, to avoid hydroscopic conditions, Mercedes does require that you change this fluid and the brake fluid every 2 years, regardless of the car being driven or not, to avoid hydroscopic conditions or oil absorbent water, which is, I made a video about that you should look into in order to avoid that issue. So the next thing it tells you to do, windshield washing system, right here. This is your reservoir for the windshield washer fluid. I have not put any lately, and I don't know if you can see it. I mean, it's down there. It's not that bad. And besides, this reservoir does hold 7.6 liter, or just about almost 2 gallons, because not only does it feed the windshield wipers in the front, but through the button on the dashboard, if you own this car, you know what I'm talking about. It also feeds the washer in the back here, and it has a whole line that goes all the way to the back. And yeah, other than that, other things it wants you to check is the tire condition and pressure. Now, little note on this: your Mercedes wants you to keep your tire pressure according to this right here. If you go inside of your driver's side door, here, let's pull this key off first. Okay. If you go in your driver's side door right here, Mercedes tells you that you should keep your front and rear tires. It's 32 in the front and 39 in the back. In case you don't have that sticker for whatever reason, there's another one in your door right here. And here we go. This is your other information. Front and rear. Here, it's front and rear 32 and 32 under normal load, and 32 and 39 under max load right here. This is the one I was thinking about when I was showing you this. Now, this is what Mercedes recommends for tire pressure. However, if you go on the actual tire, in this particular case, there's Toyo tires installed. It does tell you that there's a max, where is it? Here it is. Let me see if I can get it for you. Right here, see it? Max pressure of 51 psi. Now, I live at about 5,000 feet, and I commute regularly at about 4,400 feet of altitude. And what do I do in order to get the best mileage out of this car? I run my tire pressures at about 40 psi, and after 5 years, you can see what the tire wear looks like, which is not bad. It's actually pretty good. These tires are just about due, and I do rotate them personally every 5,000 miles. Now, I wish Mercedes also did another thing, which they don't tell you to do, is check your transmission fluid. I already took the tab off because I have access this port all the time. It doesn't come with a dipstick, but you can buy a dipstick that looks like this. And what I do recommend you do regularly, as often as you can, say, if at all possible, every other weekend when you're at home, keep your car, run your car to operating temperatures and pressures, and when the transmission is nice and toasty, stick this dipstick all the way in until it reaches bottom, then pull it out and see where your transmission oil level is. Now that we've covered what Mercedes wants you to look at every week or so, or every time you get gas, now let's dive into what this A&B light and heavier maintenance is that Mercedes wants you to address, which is, and again, it's in this booklet right here. So Mercedes, for the A service, to start out, wants you to look at do a bunch of function tests that pertain to the interior of the cabin. So what you do, you come inside here, you turn the ignition on and make sure that all your bells and whistles, all your lights come on. See, all these lights come on. and they do. Now what you also check is your above lights, these ones here. You check if these lights work right here. This here is for dimming of the rear mirror, but we're not going to get into that right now. Also, what you check is to make sure that this light works, this light works. Make sure that the rear light works under the door and above here. You're going to check interior lights. It talks about the trunk here. And this trunk light, I actually had a video on it because it was no longer working, and it's activated by this latch right here. Here it is right here. And you can either shut it off, on, or auto. You also check, again, all the interior lights. And this light here, and this light here. Again, this light under the door. We already know this one is working, but the light that most people forget, the glove box light. And there's also one light here. Okay, so all we know that all the interior lights work. We now move on to windshield wipers, windshield rear window washer system, rear window wiper, headlamps, and the headlamp system. Sorry. So what do we do here? Does the wipers work? Yes, they do. There's also an automatic function if you just keep this in a lowered position, because it has a sensor right here that if it starts raining, these will start operating. We have washer fluid? Yes, we do. And now we do the rear. Is it working? Let's see. Oh, look at that. And you activate it from here, and the spray system. See, it is spraying. I don't know if you could tell, but it's spraying fluid. So we know that also is working. We shut this off, and we shut the ignition off. Now, the next thing it wants you to do is to reset the flexible service system. We're not going to do that yet because this car still has 4,700 miles to go before a B service, as you can see there's 2 wrenches, is due. So now that we checked the interior of the car under the A service, we move on to the outside. The next thing is wheels and brakes. So what Mercedes wants you to do is to remove one tire, which we did, and check the thickness of the liner. I don't know if you could tell, but I did these brakes not too long ago, and there's lots of meat on these brakes. Not to mention, this is your tire wear sensor, which shows up on your dashboard when your tires are just about wearing out. And the light for that, it's this one right here. Let me show you. So when this light comes on, you see this light right here with a circle with like little dots around it. That it's your indication right here. This one here. That your brakes are worn out to the point where you have to replace your brake pads. Now, this is what the A check wants you to do. You only have to take off one wheel and check the meat on the brakes. But what you also want you to do, I don't want you to do it. What also will be good to do is check the thickness of your rotor. Pass your fingers on it to make sure that they are smooth and you still have plenty of meat on them. Next, it wants you to check the tires and its condition. This is the front left tire, and it's still good. And if you look at here, I don't know if you can see it. See this right here? This dot here tells you when the tires are due for replacement. And I'm almost there. I've had these tires now for about, I say, 5 years, and I can't tell you how many miles I've driven on it, but I got about a millimeter left, worth a millimeter or so with the meat left on it. But they are going to get replaced this spring or this summer, because they're starting to make noise, and there's been cupping done on them. Here, you can still see it on this rear tire right here. There's cupping on these tires because of the shocks, which were just replaced these last couple of weeks. Those are the new shocks right there. So yeah, tells you to check just one tire. Remove one tire, check the meat on it, check your tire condition, and then it tells you to check the tire pressure. Now I already told you I run my tires at about 40 psi front and back. The reason for this is because not only do I live at 5,000 feet, but I get about anywhere between 22 and 25 miles to the gallon with that tire pressure. What you also are required to do is check your spare tire pressure. And if you've seen the video that I made about the spare tire, it's right under here, and there's a port. You see this hole right here? There is your Schrader valve, and the tire pressure for your spare is 60 psi. All right, let's move on to the next thing it wants you to look. So the next thing Mercedes wants you to check under the A service, we talked about it already, but it bears repeating, is engine oil and filter change. Well, what we talked about is the check. What the change is, this is your oil filter right here, and this is where you fill it up again. And I did a video on how to change the oil on this engine, so you're welcome to look at that. And check the following fluid levels, which we already talked about. Engine oil cooling system, which is right there. Brake system, which is right there. Windshield washer. And differential lock mechanism. Engage differential locks. Move vehicle short distance to engage locks, then unlock differential locks. Now, if you look here, it tells you only to do it under the G wagons. We are in the M class. But I do recommend you do that at least once a week, and I'll show you what that entails. It's super easy, and you definitely want to get that solenoid moving, otherwise it gets stuck because it never gets operated. And then it wants you to vehicle underbody, again, but it's only for the G class, because this car does not have any grease fittings on the drive shafts, U-joints, of anything of that nature. Okay, so we are done covering the A service. Now let's jump in on what the B service involves. The B check, unlike the A check, it's much more involving, although it covers the same areas of the vehicle, such as interior, exterior, brakes, and undercarriage and whatnot. So what it's asking us to do on the interiors is warning and indicating lamps, illumination, and interior lights. Now, we already looked at the interior lights, so you know what that entails. Warning and indicating lamps, what it's talking about is your hazards, these ones here. Make sure your blinkers work. And you're going to need the help for somebody to do this with you. High beams and low beams and fog lights and things of the nature. And by the way, the fog lights are right here. We talked about illumination and interior lights. We then move on to the throttle cable, and what it's asking you to do is see if there is any friction points, and make sure that this thing is smooth operation for the cable of the throttle. Then it talks about the windshield wipers, which we already checked in the A-check, so you already know what we're talking about. And lubrication of the door locks, including the rear door. So usually what I use a lubricating oil, and what's asking you to do is spray some oil every B-check in here. There, put some in here also, right? You're going to spray a little bit of lubricating oil. And in the rear latch, which we already had shown you earlier, which is right here. Spray some oil in here. Make sure so that the stuff continues to work properly. Okay, let's see what else it tells you to address. So for the interior, besides resetting the FSS, which is the flexible service system for the Mercedes, which, like I said, we're not going to do that because it still has about 4,600 miles to go. And replace the dust filter, and that is on the passenger side. Let me show you. The interior cabin or cabin air filter will be located by removing this panel here, and I actually made a video about that, so it gives you an idea of what that involves and what it takes to replace. It's a super easy job. And then it tells you to check the park brake. The park brake will be on this side, and all it tells you to do is a function test. Make sure that your park brake works, and it releases. And to make sure that the rear wheels actually lock. All right, so that covers the interior. Again, warning and indicating lamps, illumination, throttle cable, windshield wipers, and front and back, and windshield washer fluid. Lubricate the door latch. Check the seat belts. That is the next thing. So just make sure that you check for chafing. Make sure that there's no broken strands. Make sure that everything works properly. Everything latches properly. Front and back. This one here hooks up right here, and then you have your seat belts like so. Make sure that it's not broken or strands are sticking out, and that the latching mechanism works properly. As far as the wheels and brakes, it goes more in depth this time. Now, mind you, I did replace the brakes not too long ago, so I know that they're in good shape, and it tells you the same thing. Tells you to check how much meat you have on the brakes. Make sure that there's plenty of meat on the brakes. And like I said, I already replaced the brakes. And these are your brake sensors. And the light will come on. And make sure that it also tells you the thickness of the rotor. Check for tires for damage and condition. The tires are still in good shape, although they will be replaced this coming spring, summer, because there's about 1 millimeter or 2 of rubber left. And that is all. And the tire inflation, I already told you we keep the tire on this car at 40 psi to improve mileage. All right, now that covers the wheels and brakes under the B inspection. Now we go under we cover the vehicle underbody. As far as the undercarriage goes, it tells you to check for for the M class. We're only going to stick with the M class right here, not the G wagon. Check for chafe marks, line routing, damaged components. In the event of leakage, determine cause and perform repair via separate work order. Now, I do know that I always keep an eye on this car, make sure that there is no leaks. I do know that the rear engine seal is leaking, and so is the front engine seal. But as far as everything else goes, it's fine, because besides, I'm always up in this car making sure that everything getting fixed. Next, it talks about check condition of the front axle ball joints and rubber bushings. Now, these ball joints on this car will be replaced because the rubber on the ball joints are cracking and they're about to start leaking. So this upper wishbone will be replaced, right and left, front and back, and so will the lower ball joints be replaced. So that's in the works. And all the rubber bushings, it's talking about these. So make sure that everything looks good. Like this one right here, and nothing, out of the ordinary. Check the boots and the dry shafts, make sure they're not leaking or they're cracked. Then it says check the condition of the rear front axle and rear axle ball joints and the bushings. Again, we're saying what we did in the front, we do in the back. Like I said, I am replacing these upper ball joints and lower ball joints left and right, and I just did the shocks in the back. Actually made a video about this, and I've replaced this already. And all the rubber bushings, they look fine, but again, if there's any tearing or any destruction, is to address it. That's what this essentially the beach check tells you. Check your boots on your dry shafts, make sure they're not leaking grease. And what else does it say to check? It says check the condition of the steering mechanism components and rubber boots. I just did the inner and outer tie rods last fall on this car, and in so doing, I also replaced these rubber boots, so I know that they're in good conditions. And besides, like I said, I check them all the time. Engine compartment, obviously. Check for major components. Check for chafe marks, line routing, damaged components. If you're under the hood all the time, you should be looking at this stuff. Remember when we did the power steering and return line? Remember it was leaking, and we addressed that, so we fixed that. It's essentially what you'd be doing is every time you look under the hood, look around, make sure that there is no leaks and nothing is damaged. So check engine oil and filter change. You do that in A and B checks. Check the fluid levels, correct if necessary. Again, engine cooling, anti-freeze, and corrosion protection. That's the characteristics of the anti-freeze. Again, you check the park brake. I'm sorry, the brake system. Power steering. This is right here. I just fixed this. And how you check the fluid is right here. You just lift it and you check the fluid, and it's looking good. It's where it needs to be for cold temperature. There we go. This goes back. Power steering, windshield washer system. Check the reservoir, lubricate joints. No, yeah, lubricate joints. On throttle control, check operation and condition. And I believe it's this one here. This is your throttle system, if I am not mistaken. Correct me if I am wrong, and you have to put some oil on the moving parts. Battery check and correct the fluid level. Check battery condition. Again, these are newer batteries, and that sort of check, unless you can check with the voltmeter. That's how I would do it. Check the condition of the poly V-belt. This is your serpentine belt right here. And I actually just changed this. It's in one of the videos, and I think I did about a month or so ago when I replaced the water pump, serpentine belt, and I did the in the different pulleys. So that all that got addressed. But on a B check, you are to address that as well. And this goes for the engine compartment. And then there's additional checks you do when besides the A and B checks, which is what we're going to look at next. So besides the A and B checks and service required in this booklet for the ML class, there's additional work you are required to do according to Mercedes. For example, every 60,000 miles or 4 years for the M class, replace the air filter. Approximately every 60,000 miles or 5 years, the fuel filter. Well, let me tell you about the fuel filter. This thing is no fun. It is way back here. I've heard stories. It's you got to remove this cover right here, and it's right between the body on top of the frame. And we'll make a video about that eventually. But yeah, you're supposed to change that fuel filter every, what do we say, 5 years or 60,000 miles, and then replace the spark plugs. And I believe that is back here, and it's about for the M113 engine every 100,000 miles or so. And then every 2 years, you are to replace the brake fluid. You are to inspect the body for paint and damage. I mean, this car has paint chips and people running their shopping cart into the door and opening the door against the fender. I mean, the car is 21 years old. It does have body damage, and I do plan eventually doing a paint job on it and fixing all the little things because I like this car. It's a solid car. And then lastly, inspect the body for paint damage and check chassis and support body parts for damage and corrosion. So while you're under, this is why I always advocate, if you're doing something at any area of the car, you would do well to look around. For example, if you're checking a tire pressure, look in the wheel well, look at the shock, or look at the bushings, see if you notice any leaks, because you should always be looking at a foot or two away from the area you're working on. If you're changing the oil, look in the bay, in the engine bay. If you're doing an auxiliary water pump, look around, because that ultimately, as a mechanic, is what you're supposed to do. Inspect it nearby the area that you're working on. And lastly, every 3 years, you have to replace the coolant, which we talked about already. And the sliding pop-up roof clean and grease sliding rails and sliders. You have to do that every 3 years. And you do that from the top. What you do is you open a window, there's the rails and tracks, and you put, you clean it up and you put some grease. And I believe, guys, that is all. If you have any questions or comments, as always, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Get a hold of one of these books. It tells you what to do and where to look in order to keep this amazing machine running for a very long time. This is how I managed to keep this car running for 275,000 miles. And if I can do it, guys, so can you, because how you do anything is how you do everything. I hope, as always, this video was of help to you, and we will see you at the next one. Take care.